So let's go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome our presenters today. My name is Melanie Marks. I'm the Director of Industry Marketing for Snowflake Computing. And welcome to Parity, Matthew Bebu-Lubeck. And Matthew is the Vice President of Consumer Engagement Strategy for Imperity. And he has spent the last 10 years with global beauty conglomerates L'Oreal, Estee Lauder Group, where he helped 30 of the world's most loved beauty brands use data to build highly targeted, personalized marketing experiences. And most recently, he was a VP of Data Strategy and Advanced Analytics at L'Oreal. And again, right now, he is driving the consumer engagement strategy at Imperity. Matthew, thank you so much. Welcome. And I would like to also welcome Todd Buchain. Todd has been involved with databases and BI for nearly 20 years. His experience includes roles of data engineering, BI, software development at a number of the world's largest technology organizations. And he comes to Snowflake where he was on the mobile shopping team at Amazon. So currently he's the Director of Partner Enablement at Snowflake. And gentlemen, again, welcome. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here.
So let's go ahead and take you through the agenda. This will largely be a moderated session, Q&A. Again, we do encourage you to submit your questions, and it will be largely conversational. So we will be talking about the personalized retail experience, and we'll also be talking about data ingestion, siloed data sources, unifying clickstream and transactional data, acquisition and retention loyalty marketing, and automatically scaling and managing millions of products across millions of users. And then we'll wrap up by taking your questions and hearing some closing remarks. So gentlemen, let's begin. Introduction, opportunities, and challenges. So Matthew, let's start with you and take a look here at the customer-centric challenge here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think where we're living right now, and I think everyone on this call is probably dealing with a very similar issue, which is that the landscape of marketing channels, customer experiences that we're all trying to enable, it's both forcing us to contend with how we solve for customer data, but it's created a huge customer data challenge in terms of how we get to that single view of a consumer and then create a unified brand experience. If we think about what the mandate out there is, I think we all know that brands that succeed, if we kind of jump to the next slide, brands that succeed in this journey are going to have a serious competitive advantage. And I think that we've all made small strides in terms of trying to get towards this, but I think we're in a very channel-centric world right now. So the email marketer is personalizing, the media marketer is personalizing. But if you looked at from a consumer-centric lens at what's the experience across multiple touch points on a journey, you'd see that customers are getting still today a relatively disjointed, very channel-centric brand experience. And if we jump to the next slide, I think that the challenge here is going to be getting to that single view. And there's a technology challenge, and of course, there's also a people and operations challenge that goes with that as well.
So, can you share some use cases where you see the convergence of CPG here and retail impacting data and analytics? And this is really for both of you here. But let's start with some opportunities and what our retailers are trying to accomplish.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we jump to the next slide. Yeah, so I think, look, there's kind of three macro buckets that we look at here at Imperity, and I'll share some examples from our perspective. Certainly, you could make probably pages and pages of lists here, but the three buckets that we see are brands are trying to personalize their marketing, and certainly if you're in retail, I think the name of the game is trying to drive traffic, and the old way of doing that just isn't performing the way it used to. And so personalizing touch points to improve response and improve traffic to store is pretty critical, right? And we see examples of that in different channels, like trying to personalize email and improve opens and clicks, making your one-to-one media more performant, and then making that performant at scale with tools like lookalike modeling. And then certainly there's offline levers that retailers use at scale today and can use them effectively like direct mail, but direct mail needs to be modernized and personalized just like any other channel. And then there's two other challenges around analytics and customer experience. So within analytics, everyone here is trying to unlock customer insights for a brand, and those insights can be latent insights, but they often are also us trying to create predictive insights in order to inform future marketing activity. Brands are trying to solve for the attribution challenge and get past last click and have a holistic view of customers across the journey and start to optimize in more of a journey-oriented mechanism. And then I think there's a bunch of reporting challenges we see out there where, again, if I were to stack the analytics column together, I'd say that the big problem today with these use cases is that analysts are spending most of their time just munging the data to prepare it to even do any of this work instead of actually focusing on the insights, on a better attribution model. And then brands are really starting to push into the customer experience. I think the first place that retail brands tried to do this was in the call center, just by definition of sort of the mandate of cost savings. How can we make that interaction either drive some sort of a revenue outcome or at least solve for a consumer issue faster, better? What's exciting is that I think the word customer experience in retail is starting to branch out now into the store of the future, the e-commerce and digital flagship of the future, and how those experiences can be both omni-channel but also be extremely tailored to customer needs, and of course through that improve conversion and ROI. And what's crazy is, and we work with dozens of the world's most loved brands, and what's unbelievable is this problem we're talking about trying to unlock these personalized journeys. They're a data problem because you need to get your data in order. And what's unbelievable is I think we've all spent in the industry, myself included, decades trying to solve this problem. It's an old one, and spent tens of millions of dollars trying to solve it. And yet, unbelievably, if you look out at the research today, less than 6% of marketers even have this problem solved today. And so if brands haven't solved for the data challenge, then they're not solving for the attribution challenge, then they're not personalizing most of their marketing touch points, and their experiences are still probably largely, let's call them sort of manual legacy. And I think what becomes interesting in this space is how we think about applying tech to change the challenge.
Yeah, so this leads me to my next question here, which is really talking about the personalized retail experience, as we mentioned earlier. And how are you seeing that changing in today's modern landscape?
Yeah, absolutely. So I look at this if we go to the next slide, I look at this in sort of two different ways. The first is that, and we talked before about the sort of mandate of driving traffic and personalization. So there are channels, and there's technology behind these channels that everyone's engaged to achieve what I would consider sort of the last mile of action against the consumer. So you've brought in a best-in-breed email vendor in order to communicate with customers in that channel, and you've got your website platform right in the, let's say you've got Demandware and Commerce Cloud that's powering some version of your customer digital experience, and you've got different advertising tools, either with paid social like Google and Facebook, but you may also have a programmatic stack like a DSP and DMP stack, right, and so forth, right? And the challenge is each of these was designed and purpose-built to solve for their own unique channel challenge. They have their own way of looking at the consumer. They have their own notion of unique identity. And so they don't collide together that well, but they do a great job at performing the action that they were designed for, sending better emails, allowing for commerce on a platform, transacting and managing inventory in store. But for those of us trying to solve for the customer data challenge, it's almost like we're all spending our day force-fitting our work into these tools, and it's really not clean. And if you go to the next slide, you've got on the top this sort of layer of action that we just talked about, and brands have then tried to stack underneath that solutions around master data management. They've put in place some sort of, usually a non-cloud-based EDW, right? They may have some sort of CRM tool. Sometimes brands are calling their CRM that was really designed for customer experience. They're using it as their source, their single source of truth and as their customer database, which drives a bunch of different issues. And then to try to gather data across all the places customers are touching brands, there's a whole bunch of different tools that have been implemented, be it tagging, right, and tag manager systems to try to get at this data collection layer. And the problem is none of these systems speak to each other well. Some of the ones that are designed to help do this, let's talk about MDM for a minute. Well, they were built in a way that wasn't super agile, and they certainly weren't built to handle the proliferation of different tools that are evolving in the marketplace. And so brands that are working in a sort of old MDM process are finding that the journey is very slow. And the second problem they're finding is that the MDM kind of environment is not a great place for analysts to go and spend time to try to unearth these insights or drive better attribution. It's like a means to an end. And so the tools solving for customer data really weren't designed for the marketing and analytics team to dive into the data and begin the exploration work. So even if you added everything here and a brand invested in every single box here, you'd still have a problem. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, and so the challenge is how we make our data and systems work for us. And I think what we'd love to do, if we jump to the next slide, is we'd love to share our perspective, I think, between Snowflake and Imperity of the way that we see sort of the challenges in the marketplace, and then how cloud compute is allowing us to solve for these in new ways.
Perfect. I think this segues nicely. So Todd, let's pass the presentation over to you and chat through again some of the sources of these challenges from Snowflake here.
Thanks, Matthew and Melanie. And yeah, really, it's interesting to hear as we've been going through this presentation, listening to Matthew tell the story, this exactly resonates with me. Even in an organization like Amazon, we have all of these challenges. And at Amazon, we had an EDW, and it was a database that could only support a certain amount of data. So our clickstream data, certain tables, we only had 6 months of history. When you're trying to do analysis and understand trends and patterns and a user history, you need a lot more than that. And the cost of expanding that capacity was so big and an upfront cost that even an organization like Amazon was looking for solutions. And I was surprised. I think that the thing that surprised me at Amazon when I first got there was how many times we had to say no to the business in terms of their asks for the data that they needed. And, one of the real big challenges there is concurrency. So, when you have a system, a traditional EDW, there's a limit to how many users. And today, you want all the business users to be able to access the data to answer the questions that are driving the business. On top of that, you've got to have security built into it. And just to go back to my example at Amazon, they were religious about securing customer data. It was an obsession for them. They really wanted to make sure that was secure. So every system that touched customer data had to be reviewed. And as you look at that, variety of systems that Matthew described, that is exactly what the problem is there's so many different systems talking to other systems, and they all have to have security and special pieces so that they can communicate with data, and it really presents a lot of challenges. And then the skills, within a couple months of being brought on, I was interviewing other data workers for positions because there's such a demand. There's always open headcount, always reaching for those specialized skills to work with these different tools. And then, you'd hire somebody who was really good at data analysis, but they weren't really good at Hadoop. So there was a challenge there. And so you needed these specialized skills, and it made it really hard and just a lot of time and effort, exactly as Matthew described, a lot of time and effort. And I've seen this in other customers as I've engaged with retail, is spent munging the data, preparing the data, getting it ready without even doing analysis. And it really presents a challenge. And so, that's really kind of where we go. And Matthew, did you want to jump in with your experience?
Yeah, I'd love to. If you wouldn't mind just building the slide out. So the description you just heard from Todd, I think of all of the database challenges, I'm sure a lot of you are connecting the dots, but think about it. If compute is expensive in the old world of database, then it forces you to prioritize what data you put into your database. And if you do that, you're by definition not using all of your customer data. And so that old world, I think what's exciting is we're walking away from it to a world of much more efficient cloud compute to solve for problems around customer data. The four problems that I think have emerged from those legacy systems that we're all solving for now, and again, would love to hear from you on the phone kind of as I go through these, if these resonate with you. So the first is that we're seeing that brands have an access problem of customer data, but often some database manager that's super critical to the process of enabling the capabilities, but is beholden to the customer data, and it's sitting in systems that aren't marketer friendly. And so then that database manager goes from a mode of implementing to a mode of queue management pretty fast, of a marketer and analytics team that's looking to get direct access to the data. And they're looking to implement modern governance and security tools to allow that to happen, but they want to unleash the data. Nobody wants to run a queue management program. You want to run a modern personalization shop, and you want to unleash the most users as possible in a safe governance model to be able to work with your data. The second problem is identity, which is that the world of identity, frankly, has been relatively rudimentary until recently. And so the problem we've got in the US, of course, is if every customer provided their social security number every time they transacted with a brand, there wouldn't be an identity problem because we'd have this really clean match key. But that's not the reality, right? So people's names change, they get married, people spell names differently when they type their name into a POS system versus when someone checks out on an e-commerce site, they change addresses. And so data is inherently flawed, and what you need is a probabilistic way to be able to accurately, with great confidence, be able to manage your customer identity, and then to create stability within your ID system so that the identity doesn't change and can be used persistently across systems. We like to talk a lot out there about the old world of tech. So even if you hear the word probabilistic, what you're probably hearing about is fuzzy matching or point scoring tables, where brands are basically saying, oh, well, if the name is the same, that's a point, and if the email address is the same, that's a point, and if it's 4 points, we're going to call it a 100% match, and they're calling that probabilistic matching. And what it means is, and we see this all the time, is you're calling a bunch of facts, but you have a lot of lossiness inside of your data, where the human eye would catch profiles that should be the same person, but that sort of rudimentary version of probabilistic matching isn't. And what that means is, of course, that you're labeling customers incorrectly. If two profiles are split, it means that you're calling someone a lapsed customer who's not. They've repeat purchased, but you've got them in duplicate profiles. You've got a top customer clienteling program, but you're not putting the right customers into it because you're not merging their spend to recognize them as a top customer. So the problem of identity is a technical problem, but it has a huge impact on the marketing side. We see the issue of incomplete profiles pretty consistently. Like, brands have tried to go down this path, and the result of going down the path is often that they've tried to, for example, maybe make their email database the source of truth and try to sort of beef it up as much as they can, and maybe the e-commerce team owns that, and it's all right, but you're missing a whole bunch of other really important interactions that the customer had with the brand because these initiatives have been siloed. And because of that, your view of the customer is incomplete. And when you put it all together, it tells a really interesting story about the consumer that can transform your personalization. And then the last is around actionability. Are we getting the data into the places that we need and doing that easily and with agility for you to be able to action on the data? And I'm sure everyone on this webinar has really different places that you need data to live. And what's important is that you not have to compete for that. Some people really want data inside of a modern EDW like Snowflake so that you can run really important analytics on your customer data, or even send that data downstream to other applications that you've built. But other people may want data straight to Facebook through an API for the least latency. And you may also want to get data into your email marketing vendor. And you shouldn't have to pick and choose between those, and it shouldn't be difficult to get data to those places. But historically, it has been. Does that resonate with people on the phone? I don't know if those of you that have joined us from various brands, if sort of the notion of these four challenges speaks to you or where your brand is.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and submit your questions if you would like to chime in here. So Todd, let's continue this and chat through how we're actually seeing people being divided here with these issues.
And I see this again going to my most recent experience being with Amazon prior to coming to Snowflake, but I see this in our customers all the time, is that there's this divide that separates the people who know how to work with data from the people that are making business decisions. And I think the thing that really kind of another thing on top of the lack of insight sometimes that I saw was the trust that they put in the data workers, because they were the only people who could really get the answers. So I was sitting in a meeting relatively early on in my time at Amazon, and two VPs looked at me and said, what do you think we should do based on the data, because you understand the data better than any of us. And so, it's kind of a wake-up call to me in my career that we had this challenge that, the people who were responsible to make decisions, the people who wanted to be able to do the real analysis, that have the business degrees and had all that insight, were hampered because they needed to get access to they needed direct access to the people who could work with the data, who could get new data sets in, the people who manage the data platform, because it's all kind of coming, and we really see this divide. And when we can close that divide with solutions like Snowflake and the combination of Snowflake and Amperity, it really changes the game.
Great. So I think in the interest of time, let's just skip right to some examples of how we're solutioning together. Perfect. So I think what would be interesting is to share with the group the way that a modern cloud-based EDW like Snowflake and Amperity can work together to help you master your customer data challenge and unlock your customer data. So I'm going to explain to you the Amperity solution, and I'll probably do a really light voiceover of Snowflake, and then Todd will help fill in the blanks on Snowflake's component of this. But the solution is relatively simple at face value. So on the left, you have all of your data sources where customer data lives. The way that we work together is, first of all, what's important is to be able to get that data and be able to get it somewhere so that we can begin to think about how we work on resolution. And an EDW like Snowflake is a great place to throw all of that data just to get it co-located into one place. Because usually the hardest part of the journey on the IT side is simply just getting access to the data and dumping it somewhere. What used to be the hardest part of the journey was all the ETL work that you had to do. And I'm actually not going to talk about ETL at all, because there is no ETL process in what I'm going to describe, and that's really important to understand. So once the data is sitting inside of Snowflake, then we're able to work with Amperity layered with Snowflake to be able to drive identity resolution across all of those disparate data sources and come up with a single view of your consumer with multiple views of them inside of Amperity. The single view of the customer in Amperity becomes available inside of a couple of different solutions. One is a SQL power user environment where if you're an analyst, you'd be able to go in and query the data any way you want and be able to make use of that data. Second is that we can send that data direct out to your marketing destinations, your systems, for example, like POS and e-commerce. But we can also send that data as a full extract or as automated segments into Snowflake. And the data inside of Snowflake then can be available for you to be able to run your advanced analytics programs directly in Snowflake if you're already doing that today, or to send that data from Snowflake downstream to other applications that you may be running. Todd, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I always think of Snowflake as an enabling technology. It makes it easier because typically, and companies large and small have very similar architectures that they're dealing with. And the amount of time and effort that they have to put into that, whether you call it a data lake or a staging area on the right, as all that data is landing and you're streaming data into that system, and the volumes at companies like Amazon are tremendous. Right, and you had different. In fact, what they're doing today is they have different systems for the different volumes because ordering data is relatively small, but web clickstream data is huge, and customer service data and landing all of that may come in at different volumes, different velocities, landing it all in one place without having to think about it, and that's really the difference. That's when I saw what Snowflake was capable of doing and how it's been helping our customers over the last few years of doing direct work with customers and through our partners delivering to our customers. It's really that it's a platform that doesn't need to be managed. So all those resources that you would typically be spending managing your database can now be turned to better, more value-added activities.
Yeah, that's great. And I think if we go to the next slide, so as an example of the way that we're working with a client together today, I think we thought this would be helpful for everyone on the phone to be able to see. So first, some common use cases that we see and we tackle together. One is that you need a unified and usable view of your customers, and you want to get that across all of your data sources. You don't want that to take 2 years. You want that to be fast. And then you need to be able to get that data into a bunch of different places for various actions. You want to build automated segments. You also want to be able to build manual segments. You've got the need to build specific suppression lists for different environments like Google and Facebook so that you target people who are really going to be new to your brand and you don't target people that just bought and waste that acquisition dollar. There's a whole bunch of really interesting events that your brand may be running, and you need a way to collect that data and then to action on it inside of your marketing, whether it be one-to-one or through lookalike modeling. And then certainly for retailers that do direct mail, we help make sure that you've got all the right data so that you can create programmatic, very targeted direct mail. And so in this example, rent, and we needed those to be able to sit safely in sort of the right tenants. That data gets sent into Snowflake where it's co-located, and historically what had been happening was then the brand had to invest dollars to do all of the data preparation on this data every time they wanted to run a campaign. So you can imagine the latency between sort of time of brief and then time of campaign. What's changed is that data is now flowing through Imperity. Imperity is unifying the data into a single view of the customer, creating a common customer 360 view of all of this disparate data, and then the data is being orchestrated downstream to Facebook, to Google, AdWords, into Snowflake, into LiveRAM for onboarding so that we can use that data for targeting and programmatic media, and then also into Optimizely where the brand is deploying their digital personalization strategy. And what this has allowed the brand to do is, number one, is to enable marketing automation and to be able to do that scalably. And second is to enable attribution with low latency, so you can see the speed to which we're able to drive better attribution for the brand. And I don't know for those of you on the phone, but a lot of companies are coming out of a world almost of marketing mix modeling or maybe multi-touch attribution, but only on their e-commerce website. And so to be able to get to more holistic attribution with low latency is often a huge win for evolving brand measurement. And then the third is the ability to manage data across channel, and for that to not be sort of a hair-pulling exercise. And so now that's enabled for the brand. And if we go to the next slide, I think what's super exciting is the kinds of results that we're able to drive. So in this case, here's another retailer that we've worked on collaboratively, and I think what's pretty incredible about this work is if you think in 10 weeks about what we've accomplished, some brands have spent 10 years working on this. Right, so being able to get to complete profiles, enabling email personalization, doing new Facebook targeting one-to-one and through lookalike modeling, and then unlocking new insights that are fueling brand and product development to help them think about how they personalize what products they bring to market based on their customers. I mean, this is a customer-centric transformation for this brand, and it's happening, with first proof points in about 10 weeks, which is just, again, it speaks to the power of applying machine learning to some of the problems that have been very manual in the data space. And you can see results where we're seeing up to 16 time improvement on click rates, doubling email open rates and sort of the readability of that channel. And you can imagine the impact that adds to their sender scores. And then you can see pretty significant return on ad spend, up to 48% return on ad spend improvements in Facebook from applying better first-party data to some of their strategies. And I think, and again, for those of us that are coming out of sort of, decades of trying to solve this problem in the retail space, I don't think a lot of us, myself included, before the experience of trying to work with modern tools like a Snowflake or Imperity, could claim to have done this kind of work, at this speed. And so it's pretty, frankly, actually personally gratifying, but really exciting to be a part of the change with these brands and to see them light up and see the difference in what's being unlocked for them.
And just to add on to that, I think just the database alone would take 20 weeks just to get deployed in a normal situation. So Snowflake makes it easy. So thanks, everyone.
No, that's great. And I also wanted just to, before we wrap up, let's take our audience through some closing thoughts here and really leave our folks with something to think through. And I'd like both of you to kind of chat through some of these points here. We've got just about another minute, and so let's take them through some of these closing points here. Todd, let's start with you.
So really, yeah, I mean, Snowflake is a cloud-based pay-as-you-go system, so you can just get started. You don't have to think about it. As I mentioned earlier, just the database layer alone could take half a year to get started on. But with Snowflake, we're seeing customers get started in days, and then they can build out their additional strategy. They don't have any more silos. Things move very quickly once it's all in there. And it's again, the idea of spending all their time acting on data and not just sitting there trying to figure out how to get it right into the right format to be able to work with, and really, win with your data to understand what your customers are doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would add also that the old way of doing this was, okay, you go and you consult, you pick your whole tech stack, you look at some really big budget number, you pick your systems integrator, and then after 6 to 8 months of picking all of those things, you big bang your project. And what's pretty exciting now, I think, is brands are starting with us from a use case orientation and saying, hey, here are the 3 or 4 things we really want. We need a stable view of our consumer with one common identity. We want to start personalizing the following types of emails. We want to get data into our POS, so that we can enable a better clienteling program, and we're just road mapping them and knocking them off one by one. And so I think it's a pretty exciting space. I'd encourage all of you to say, hey, what are the 2 or 3 use cases I'd like to start with, and not think of that big bang approach, but think about who are the vendors out there that can, and certainly Imperative is one, but who are the vendors out there that can help you sort of begin to knock off those use cases piece by piece? Because I think a bottoms-up approach to data is going to be the way that we actually solve for this holistically.
All right, so unfortunately I think we don't have a lot of time for questions here, so let's go ahead and leave with your email addresses, both of you. So we have a way for our audience to follow up if you do have any questions. Right on your screen you do see Matthew from Imperative and Todd Bouchain from Snowflake, and we do welcome you to ask any follow-on questions that you might have. Sorry, our time is cut just a little bit short here. And Matthew and Todd, thank you so much for your time and insight. This was, I think, great and leaves our audience with a lot to think through here. So thank you for your time, and thank you to our audience, and I hope everybody has a great day.